The room smelled like cold champagne and warmed over triumph when Nora Whittaker realized no one at her husband's gala knew she was 6 months pregnant with his child. On stage, Adrian Cole's arm ringed Sloane Mercer's waist as he announced a new era for Cole and North. A cleaner story, a stronger future. The lights split Nora's vision into hard diamonds. She pressed a hand to her belly, to the small heel, nudging from the inside, and saw Sloane angle her face toward the cameras, glossy and victorious. The ovation swelled. Nora slipped her wedding band into her clutch, then disappeared before the next speech could trap her name in applause. Nora had not meant to vanish. Vanishing suggested theatre, decoys and trapdoors. Hers was a survival shuffle, learned from years of living beside a man who wielded silence like a blade and money like weather. She left the gala by a service corridor that smelled of bleach and lemon, the kind of hallway staff learn by heart, and guests pretend doesn't exist. The guard, bored and scrolling, barely lifted his eyes as she passed. Outside, Seattle's rain had started, thin, needling, unafraid to wet silk. She caught a ride share whose driver played classic rock under his breath, and she didn't speak until they were across the bridge, city lights stringing behind like wrought-iron constellations. "Change of plan," she said quietly. "Could you drop me at Harbour Clinic instead?" The driver glanced into the rearview mirror, catching the edge of her belly under the discreet black dress, the weariness of posture more than years. "You okay?" "I will be," she lied. Inside Harbour Clinic, Dr. Reena Patel listened to the story without interrupting. Dr. Patel had the kind of face that made you tell yourself the truth. Nora had met her months earlier when she began prenatal appointments under her maiden name. Back then, she still hoped Adrian might lean toward her with something like tenderness. Back then, she hadn't watched him rehearse a new future with Sloane Mercer, the woman whose job was turning scandals into symmetry. "Any pain?" Dr. Patel asked. "Dizziness? Cramping?" "No. Just adrenaline." Nora folded her hands, the wedding band indent fresh against her finger. "He announced it like a promotion," she whispered. "No one knows We're going to keep you and the baby safe." Dr. Patel's voice was steady. "You knew this might come." Nora nodded. She had a bag already, tucked beneath a bench at the clinic, packed with photocopies and a pair of walking shoes, a less traceable phone, the banking card for the account she'd reopened in her own name. She'd rehearsed small, lawful exits, a P.O. box, a place in a shelter that didn't turn people away for being married to men everyone else admired. She had learned that safety wasn't always police or locks. Sometimes safety was a woman who knew all the side doors. By dawn, a bed waited at Lighthouse Haven. Small, sterile, merciful. The staff logged her as Noelle White, a name that tasted like a first snowfall. She stowed the dress in a bin and tugged on her softest sweatshirt, the one nobody had bought her, the one that owed its comfort to her alone. She slept clutching a copy of the trust amendment Adrian had signed last year, which protected any minor child with a guaranteed health fund and a conversion right to shares upon birth. She had watched him initial page after page, distracted by the ping of texts. Sloane had stood in the doorway then, a silhouette of appetite, smiling like she could already smell the ink drying. At 9, Lighthouse Haven's director, a tall black woman named Deirdre, slid into the chair by Nora's bed with a paper cup of tea. "Abuse can look like a spreadsheet," she said gently, after hearing enough to understand. "It can look like a boardroom or a diamond bracelet. We don't ask survivors to prove their bruises." Nora let out a little sound she didn't recognize as crying until it changed shape and soaked the collar of her sweatshirt. Deirdre squeezed her hand. "You're not weak for loving him," she added. You're brave for loving your child more. Nora stayed quiet, because that sentence went through her like heat. Love. She had loved the boy who invented devices out of salvaged parts, the man who built a company with a relentless mind and a terrified heart. She hadn't loved his shame, or the way shame demanded witnesses to control. He'd learned to mute her with money, to press her into carefully curated silence. But love was the fluttering foot against her palm, and the steady thud on the clinic's monitor, and the future refusing to be erased. That afternoon, Deirdre introduced her to a pro bono attorney from a program that served expectant mothers at risk. Maya Ortiz, early 40s, sharp eyes, soft cardigan. She carried a legal pad like a shield and listened like a neighbor. "Here's what I think," Maya said, after skimming Nora's folder. "You don't go to war. You write a map. You've got the trust amendment. Good. You've got the prenatal records. Great. We'll file a notice of intent regarding paternity and the child's rights under Washington law. We'll also place a private guardian ad litem on standby, in case anyone tries to argue your baby's interests without, an actual baby in the room." "Adrian has a very good legal team," Nora murmured. "Then we'll be better," Maya said. "And we'll be quiet until the moment being quiet stops serving you." Nora blinked hard. Quiet had always been the cost of staying. Maybe it could be the strategy for leaving. That night, as rain slicked the windows with a silver sheen, Nora wrote a letter to her unborn child in a simple notebook Lighthouse gave every resident. She wrote about real oranges and how they bruised if you stored them under heavier things, about the way truth floated, even when you tried to anchor it with lies. She wrote, "I am leaving to make room for your arrival." She wrote, "He may not learn in time, but I will not let that be your story." She closed the notebook and slept, deeply for the first time in months, because vanishing had made space for being seen. Sloane Mercer woke before her alarm, the sky a pale insinuation beyond her apartment's floor-to-ceiling windows. She lay still, measuring her victory in square footage and glass. The gala had gone as planned. Adrian had said the right words. She had worn the right dress. There was a photograph on the front of 3 business newsletters already. Sloane Mercer, the woman who cleaned Cole and North. He texted at 6. "We did well." She typed, deleted, typed again. "We always do." Sloane believed in the value of narrative, the way the right story softened the jaw of a scandal. Everyone thought she liked power for the way it tasted. She liked it for what it prevented. Power meant no one could close a door in your face and tell you to come back with a better resume, or a better father, or a better personality. Power meant her mother's small failures stopped being Sloane's inheritance. In the office by 8, she found Adrian already at his desk, tie loosened, face grey with the residue of performance. He had slept here. He did that when he was terrified, which lately was almost always. "We should file the paperwork this week," Sloane said brightly. She didn't have to say which paperwork. The divorce, the consolidation of personnel to streamline optics, the severance for a woman who'd been out of sight for months, a woman whose absence had started as an embarrassment and become, unintentionally, a tool. Adrian rubbed his temples. "My counsel wants to wait on an updated valuation," he muttered. "Simplify the split. I'm not trying to screw anyone." Sloane laughed lightly, like a balancing act. "You're not screwing anyone. You're making your life align with your reality." He didn't answer. When he was like this, Sloane pretended he'd said something romantic and generous. She'd learned that if she supplied the feeling, he was more likely to supply the facts she needed. By mid-morning, a private investigator called her, a woman named Rain, who talked like a dial tone. "No clear sightings," Rain said. "Your wife, Excuse me, your client's wife. Used a ride share but got out before the drop. We're scrubbing cameras. Discreetly, Sloane said. I don't want this messy. Rain paused, as if to assess the humor in that. She doesn't seem messy, she said dryly. She seems prepared. Sloane smiled into the phone. Everyone breaks, she said. Once they realized they lost the plot. She hung up and called the communications team. Draft 2 announcements, she said. 1. Personnel change in Family Foundation. 2. Engagement. Stagger the releases. Keep her name out of it. We use mutual decision to part ways if anyone asks. By lunchtime, legal emailed a proposed NDA with a number that would make most people stop asking questions. Sloane printed it on creamy paper and slid it across Adrian's desk with a pen. I don't want to humiliate her, he said, eyes on the window. You're protecting her, Sloane answered. The public is cruel. This gives her privacy and security. It gives us oxygen. He signed, initials precise. Sloane loved the look of his initials. 2 clean strokes, 2 knives crossing. She took the folder to her office and locked it in the drawer. Then she made a second call, this time to a lawyer who owed her favors and liked to be paid in influence more than cash. What do you need? He asked. A safety instrument, she said. If a previously unknown heir appears, something that allows the company to proceed with leadership changes without delay. A baby clause? He chuckled. An equity gate, she replied. Call it optics if you have to. He promised to send language by end of day. Sloane pictured her own face on the cover of a glossy magazine. The headline, something about grit and glass ceilings. She told herself that order was kindness, and that love was the story you told so the world wouldn't chew you alive. That evening, home again, she poured sparkling water into a stemmed glass and scrolled through old photos of herself at 22, cheap lipstick, thrifted suit, big ideas, and felt a surge of pity for that girl. She texted Adrian. Dinner? He replied. Late, don't wait up. She typed, of course, and did not add the naked and essential question pressing at her ribs. What if the wife didn't break? At Lighthouse Haven, quiet had its own pulse. You could feel it in the laundry room, where women folded towels like prayers, in the kitchen where someone always stirred soup, even if no one was hungry. Nora learned the schedule in a day. The clinic van at 9, the counseling circle at 11, job training at 2, legal clinic on Thursdays, shared chore lists, lights out by 10. It felt like summer camp for people who had walked out of the woods by themselves. She wrote most mornings. The notebook became a ledger of symptoms and feelings, of names she didn't speak aloud, Adrian, Sloane, of the advice Deirdre offered in small bowls. The baby turned in her. The baby demanded watermelon. In therapy, the counselor, a white-haired woman with kind eyes, asked, "When did your love become a contract?" Nora laughed, ragged. When he started calling my concerns noise. What if he didn't mean to hurt you? The counselor asked gently. Then it's more dangerous, Nora whispered. Because how do you hold someone accountable for harm they do by habit? How do you prove a wound that looks like a spreadsheet? Maya stopped by with coffee and updates. We filed the notice, she said, and quietly retained a guardian ad litem, GAL, in the event of pre-birth litigation. I also spoke to Dr. Patel about a birth plan that protects your privacy. We don't have to be warriors. We just have to be inevitable. I'm scared of him, Nora said bluntly. Not of his hands, of his reach. Maya nodded. Power is often the story we tell about ourselves, and then force others to act out. His story is that he fixes things. Your story can be that you grow them. Do you think he loved me? The question came out before Nora could stop it. I think he loves control, Maya said softly. And I think he confuses control for safety. Afterward, Nora walked to the water. A gull balanced on a piling, regarding her with the caustic dignity of shorebirds. She didn't know how this would end. She only knew she had chosen a different middle. She placed her palm over the small, confident kick and said aloud, "We are not a problem to solve." That night, she called her sister Lena on the safe phone Maya had set up. Lena had long ago fled the family's eating house arguments for a co-op in Portland, where she taught art to kids who needed brushes more than detention slips. "I'm okay," Nora said when Lena picked up. "I'm safe." Lena exhaled like a storm breaking. "Do you need money? A room? I have space and a futon, and I'm making spinach lasagna that tastes better than it sounds. I need you to know I'm leaving for good," Nora said. "I'm not coming back until I can come back as myself." "You can always come back as yourself," Lena said fiercely. "You're the only person in this family who remembered how." They talked logistics, a suitcase, a storage unit, a few boxes of Nora's life that Lena would quietly reclaim from the Whitaker Cole penthouse when the building staff changed shifts and Sloane's eyes were pointed outward. When they hung up, Nora felt both thin and strong, like a wire. 2 days later, the investigator Rain finally found a frame of video. Nora slipping through a clinic corridor in a black dress. By the time Rain reached the clinic, Nora was at the shelter, and the shelter was a legal fortress with a heartbeat. Rain reported back to Sloane with a professional's neutrality. "She's not lost," Rain said. "She's hiding well." "Everyone wants something," Sloane replied. "Find out what her attorney wants." Rain didn't answer that. There were lines she didn't cross. Instead, she asked, "You ever think the wife is a mirror? That's why you hate her?" Sloane's laugh was a knife's edge. "I don't hate her," she said. "I'm tidying a mess she let happen." But that night, Sloane dreamed of a girl with soft hands, cutting through glass with her bare fingers. She woke with her heart racing and texted Adrian, "We need to accelerate." He didn't reply. The first time Adrian realized he had taken a wrong turn, he was 12, and he told his mother he had won an award that didn't exist. He liked the way her face lit, the way disappointment retreated. The second time, he was 22, and told a venture capitalist that his prototype had more patents than it did. He gathered them afterward. Papers like fig leaves. Good intentions. Thin cover. Now 40, he watched the view from his office, barges crawling like beat-up beetles down the slate water, and wanted to push time backward like a barge against a current. He was not a cruel man. He told himself this the way he tracked burn rates. He could list his good works, scholarships, a free clinic, a foundation that said, "We care" in tasteful serif font. He could list the reasons. A father who shouted through his teeth, a mother who performed steadiness like an Olympic sport. He had built a life where shouting was subcontracted to other people, where steadiness was an expense line item managed by women like Sloane. He had loved Nora. He had loved her because she didn't measure his value in headlines. He had loved her until fear told him love was a liability. He had started calling her questions noise when his company needed silence to close a deal. He had started calling her sadness inconvenient when investors wanted cheerful wives beside their CEOs. He didn't realize she had vanished until morning, when her phone went straight to voicemail and the house smelled like lilies from last night's centerpieces. He called Lena, who didn't answer. He called Harbor Clinic and received a polite no comment. He called his lawyer, who said the NDA was ready when he was. He rubbed his temples and said, "I don't want to make her feel like a criminal." "You're protecting her," the lawyer lied professionally. "And yourself, and the company." He reread the trust amendment Nora had insisted on last year, during a moment when anxiety had made him malleable. Any child born of the marriage was granted health care, housing, education, and a conversion right to equity upon live birth, with the board obligated to recognize that right within 30 days. He had signed because she had cried, and he hated tears more than almost anything. He had forgotten that signatures were promises that survived mood. His phone buzzed. "Sloane, everything on track. We'll keep her name out of it." He stared at the words "her name." The absence felt like theft. He left the office and walked, cap pulled low, from South Lake Union to the market where tourists licked rain off their lips and vendors hurled fish to the rhythm of cheering. He stopped at the stall where Nora once bought an ugly, perfect lemon plant and told him plants kept a home honest. He had thrown it away during a minimalist phase. He had thrown away 1,000 small things without noticing. A woman brushed past, belly rounded under a denim jacket, a man walking behind her with his hands in the air like he was warding off the weather. Adrian felt something like a sob rise and swallow it back into his throat. He wanted to protect, and he wanted to possess, and he didn't know the difference anymore. That evening, Sloane came to his apartment with Thai food and a spreadsheet. "Here's how we sequence the announcement," she said, spreading the papers like cards. "Your board prefers certainty. Our investors prefer good photos. Your mother prefers a narrative that makes you noble. Fortunately, I can give all three what they want." He wanted to ask if she could give him the sound of Nora's voice, forgiving him. He ate noodles instead. When Sloane mentioned a clause to protect leadership from unplanned disruptions, he said, "Meaning, a precaution," she said airily. "If anyone contests decisions based on claims that aren't yet substantiated." "Like a child," he said. He meant my child. The words slept in his mouth like sedatives. "Like any claim," she said. "It's about optics." He nodded and meant it when he asked to review the language. He wanted to be ethical. He also wanted to stop the freefall. When she left, he sat in the dark and listened to the rain. He found a voicemail he'd saved without knowing why. Nora laughing about the lemon plant, saying, "We can keep ugly things if they're alive." He pressed his forehead to the cold window and wished for an uglier, truer life. Dr. Patel marked Nora's file confidential and arranged a private birthing suite at a hospital across the bridge that quietly partnered with Lighthouse. "You won't be alone," she promised. "We'll minimize faces and maximize competence." Maya introduced Nora to the guardian ad litem, a black man in his 50s named Julian Cross, with a voice that made people put their phones away. "I'm here for your child," he said. "That includes what's best for you. Those needs are braided." "Do you have children?" Nora asked. "3, Julian said. 2 grew up on the south side of Chicago and learned to read the street like scripture. 1 is a cello with legs. I'm good at listening to different kinds of music." He drafted a simple plan. Nora's birth would be recorded under her chosen name. Upon delivery, Julian would file notice with the court that baby W had rights under the trust. Maya would move for a protective order that required any legal action to be noticed to counsel, not to Nora directly. They drew arrows on a whiteboard like a football coach. It felt ridiculous and necessary. In the meantime, Nora took the bus to the diner near the waterfront that always needed a morning hostess who remembered regulars' names. She liked the smell of coffee and yeast, the ritual of refilling mugs, the gentle gossip of old men who believed in the moral universe of baseball. She told no one who she was. She told everyone, in the way she held herself, that she was not to be handled roughly. One morning, a woman in a camel coat sat at the counter and watched Nora as if cataloguing her choices. "I used to be you," the woman said eventually. "Different man, different skyline." "What happened?" Nora asked, because women tell stories in diners when they can't tell them at home. "I left while I still recognized my handwriting," the woman said, and left a tip big enough to be a dare. By midsummer, Sloane had tightened the narrative loops. Public foundation statement, engagement photos in a tasteful park, a profile in a business magazine that called her the Velvet Wrench. She had rain-shadow Nora's sister, but never long enough to be a crime. She had her lawyer float a rumor. The wife left him years ago. The marriage was over in everything but paperwork. People needed a reason to stop asking questions. Laziness was a reason. Envy was another. Then, one humid night, Nora woke to a band around her belly and the unmistakable truth of a body that had decided it was time. Deirdre called Dr. Patel. Maya gathered papers. Julian called the clerk's after-hours line. 7 minutes apart, the nurse said. We're moving. At the hospital, someone dimmed the lights. Someone murmured affirmations that didn't sound like theatre. Nora squeezed Deirdre's fingers when the contraction crested and saw, weirdly, the lemon tree she had thrown away. We can keep ugly things if they're alive, she thought. Grief and hope braided as the baby fought his way into the bright. Hello, Maya whispered, because Maya was in the room in case the world required lawyers at the first breath. When the baby cried, something in the building's bones seemed to answer. It's a boy, the doctor said, and laid him on Nora's chest. He was furious and perfect, lungs like bells. I'm sorry, she told him, for everything she couldn't yet repair. I'm not sorry, she added. To honor the part of her that had chosen a map instead of a war, they named him Eli in the birth record, simple and strong. Julian filed the notice. Maya texted a single word to Deirdre. Arrived. Deirdre texted back a heart, and then, after a beat, the lemon emoji. Across town, Sloane watched her phone light with an alert from Rain. The message contained one line. She delivered. Sloane stared at the wall and felt the shape of a plan tilt. She did not panic. She did not believe in panic. She believed in adding language to contracts. She believed in making the ground so level that the woman on it could not gain purchase. Accelerate, she messaged her lawyer. File the equity gate. But the next morning, Maya moved faster. She filed a motion sealing Eli's medical records and registering the trust's obligations. She scheduled a courtesy meeting with Cole & North's general counsel in a quiet conference room with bad art. My client is not here because she is healing, Maya began, and because she has been harmed. We are not seeking theatrics. We are seeking compliance with existing obligations. General counsel looked old and tired. Ms. Ortiz, he said, we don't negotiate via press releases. I assumed not, Maya replied. We negotiate via law. Julian placed a manila folder on the table, its weight disproportionate to the paper inside. The child's interests transcend optics, he said. I suggest we stop using optics as a euphemism for avoidance. The room quieted. The security guard down the hall watched a soccer video on his phone, with the sound off. The city rain continued its soft systems check on the windows. Very well, General Counsel said eventually. We'll acknowledge receipt. We'll brief the board. Please do, Maya said brightly. We'll be in touch regarding your timing. Babies don't care about quarters. When they stepped into the hall, Maya exhaled a laugh. He's going to call Sloane, she said. She's going to try to set the stage. We're going to move the stage. How? Nora asked when Maya visited her later. Eli sleeping in a swaddle like a mission accomplished. By showing up, Maya said simply. At the exact moment they think presence is a privilege they control. The boardroom at Cole & North was set for ritual. Chemically chilled air, bottled water, too many chairs. Sloane had orchestrated the agenda. Leadership transition, foundation restructure, engagement announcement, framed as personal note. Adrian had shaved, eyes glass clear in that way he could achieve with focus and will. The directors arrived with their laptops and their tolerance. Sloane began, as all good PR people do, with gratitude. "Thank you for your stewardship," she said. The word stewardship doing a lot of moral heavy lifting. "We've prepared a clean arc for the quarter." They were halfway through the slide deck when the glass door opened. The receptionist's polite, "I tried," was a shadow behind 3 figures. Maya with a messenger bag, Julian with a thin smile, and Deirdre carrying an infant seat covered with a light blanket. "Excuse me," Sloane said, voice cool. "This is a private." "It's an obligations meeting," Maya answered, as if correcting a recipe. "Don't worry. We brought what you need to proceed." She set a packet of filings on the table with a parental patience that made 2 directors instinctively sit straighter. Adrian stood. The world compressed to the size of a car seat. Deirdre peeled back the blanket. Eli blinked, the unfocused ancient stare of the newly arrived. For the first time in months, Adrian's face rearranged into something unguarded. He reached toward the carrier and stopped halfway, his fingers hovering like apology. "Mr. Cole," Julian said, all courtly gravitas. "I'm the court-appointed guardian at Latham for the child's interests. We're here to ensure the board recognizes his rights under the trust within the 30-day window. We thought it would be helpful for the board to understand the stakes with their own eyes." "Remove them," Sloane told security, calm as ice. "Try it," Maya said pleasantly, and 2 directors coughed to cover smiles they didn't want recorded. General Counsel cleared his throat. "We are obligated to hear this," he said. "We can do so efficiently." Sloane wanted to burn the room down with composure. "We are happy to comply with lawful obligations," she said. "We've instructed our attorneys to file a temporary equity gate to ensure the company's stability." Maya nodded, as if Sloane had said good morning. "You can file anything you like," she said cheerfully. "Courts love filings. The trust predates your gate. We will, of course, litigate any attempt to subordinate a child's rights to optics." Adrian found his voice. "Where's Nora?" he asked, looking not at Maya but at the baby, as if the infant might answer. "Recovering," Deirdre said. "She doesn't owe this room her body to make her child's rights real." Sloane stepped closer to the car seat, curious in spite of everything. "He has your mother's chin," she said. It came out softer than she'd intended. Something deep and unclaimed in her trembled and hardened at once. A director with grandfatherly hair leaned forward, peering. "He looks like trouble," he said, with something like affection. The room's temperature rose 1/2 a degree. Julian summarized the filings. Maya handed out copies. Deirdre checked the baby's breathing with a practiced glance. And then, because she was a woman who believed in ritual, she pulled a small, ugly lemon from her bag and placed it on the table. "What is that?" Sloane asked, baffled. "A reminder," Deirdre said, "that honesty isn't always pretty. But it's alive." Adrian made a sound that startled even him. Half laugh, half sob. He looked at Sloane as if seeing her at an angle he hadn't examined before. He looked at the directors and understood, with a clarity that was both humiliating and freeing, that the story needed to change, and he didn't need to be the hero of it to survive. "Record the child's entitlement," he told General Counsel quietly. "Proceed with the trust recognition, and schedule time for me to meet with Ms. Ortiz and Mr. Cross. Without PR." Sloane's head turned sharp. "Adrian!" "Sloane," he said, not unkindly. "This is not optics. It's a baby." A silence, then, that sounded like a new room being built inside an old house. The directors nodded. General Counsel wrote. The receptionist brought in a glass of water, as if delivering communion. When Maya, Julian, and Deirdre left, the air felt thinner, truer. Sloane gathered her notes with surgical precision. "We will recalibrate," she said. "We always do." But when the door closed behind her, she leaned against the cool hallway wall, palms flat, and realized that not every room could be managed. She had told herself she didn't hate the wife. She had told herself she was tidying. Now she wondered if she had been trying to tidy the child inside herself, who learned early that love and scarcity were twins. The courthouse smelled like paper and ambition. The hearing had been calendared fast. Maya had a way with clerks that involved cookies, clarity, and kindness. Sloane arrived with a team from a firm that named its conference rooms after gods. Adrian arrived alone, which made some reporters blink. The issues were technical and tender: sealing the baby's records, formal recognition of the trust rights, a temporary order preventing any disparagement of the mother in public communications, a schedule for parenting time that centered a newborn's actual needs rather than a calendar's demands. Judge Elkins, late 50s, an ex-public defender in expensive shoes, looked over her glasses at the assembled council. "I have read," she said, "enough briefs to knit a quilt. What I need now are facts and decency." Julian, with that voice that encouraged phones to sleep, spoke first. "The infant, Eli Whittaker Cole, is healthy. The mother is recovering. The trust is unambiguous. The child's interest is in stability and truth." Maya followed. "My client has been subject to a campaign of managed omission," she said. "She asks not for spectacle but for acknowledgement, protection from further harm, and the freedom to parent without being turned into a press release." Sloane's counsel tried to argue the equity gate, the potential for disruption, the importance of leadership continuity. Judge Elkins held up a hand. "Babies are disruption with eyebrows," she said dryly. "Your client chose to be a father. He can choose to be a leader who tells the truth." Sloane shifted in her chair, annoyed at the judge's domestic metaphor. She preferred metaphors you could monetize. When it was Adrian's turn, he stood, hands open. He began, and stopped. He had practiced the words in the mirror and hated them. He tried again. "I failed my wife," he said simply. "I let fear make me cruel. I let ambition make me dishonest. I want to do what is right for my son and decent to his mother." His voice did not break. It worked. Judge Elkins nodded like a teacher hearing a late correct answer. "Here's what we will do," she said. She listed orders that sounded like sanity: records sealed, trust rights recognized, a protective order limiting contact to counsel while emotions cooled, a temporary parenting plan shaped by Eli's age, with lactation considerations and a gradual, supervised introduction, mandatory co-parenting counseling with a therapist who charged less than a corporate lawyer and produced more durable results. "And Ms. Mercer," the judge added, turning toward Sloane, "I don't usually address third parties, but you are here and very interested. I will be frank. Your influence has been unhelpful. If you wish your public image to survive, you would do well to adopt a practice called stepping back." Sloane's jaw barely moved. "Understood," she said. She did not, but she understood that further argument would leave bite marks. Outside, reporters shouted questions that no one answered. Maya put a hand on Adrian's sleeve. "There's a room down the hall," she said. 5 minutes, 1 question each, then back to counsel." They sat in that room, Maya, Julian, Deirdre, Adrian, around a table that had seen worse. "Is Nora safe?" Adrian asked. "Yes," Maya said, "and she will remain so." "Can I—" He stopped. "Will she let me see him?" "When it's safe," Julian said. "When it's useful to the child, not merely the parent." Adrian nodded. "I accept the court's orders," he said. "I also would like to apologize to Nora, in writing, so she can choose when to read it." "I'll convey that," Maya said, neither warm nor cold. "And Sloane?" Julian asked. Not quite a question. Adrian exhaled. "I'm disentangling," he said. "It will be messy. but I'm done letting my life be managed like a crisis with a budget." Deirdre smiled then, small but real. "That's a good sentence," she said. "Keep writing like that. Redemption is not an epiphany. It is a schedule." Adrian woke early and read about infant sleep, and realized most of it was lies. He joined a co-parenting class where a contractor named Luis talked about his ex-wife with respect that embarrassed the room into honesty. He called his mother and, for the first time, did not ask her to make his shame sound like a weather report. He saw a therapist who smelled faintly of peppermint and told him, "You confuse compliance for love." He wrote the letter to Nora. He wrote 3 drafts, and then a 4th that was shorter. "I will not ask you to persuade me I am good," it read. "I will not ask you to be my mirror. I will be Eli's father with the humility that requires. I will protect your privacy as you choose. I am sorry. I will act like I am sorry." Nora read the letter on a Tuesday as Eli snored against her collarbone. She didn't cry. She felt a release so subtle it might have been a muscle untangling. She circled 2 sentences and wrote in the margin, "We'll see." She allowed a supervised visit in a room with pale toys and a social worker who liked jazz. Adrian held Eli as if the baby were both heavier and lighter than expected, and said, "Hi," like a man stepping into lake water for the first time. Eli regarded him with uncommitted dignity, then yawned. Sloane, meanwhile, discovered that stepping back did not mean disappearing. It meant walking the length of her apartment and hearing her own footsteps. She took the call from her lawyer about the SEC's interest in a mischaracterized investor disclosure, manufactured by a junior associate trying to impress her, and didn't immediately pick up a scapegoat. She met with a therapist who refused to be charmed and learned that control had been her mother tongue, born of a childhood where the rent depended on pleasing men who didn't merit pleasing. She went to a nursery and bought a lemon tree, ugly and brave, and set it on the sill. She wrote an email to the board recommending that the equity gate be rescinded in favor of a policy that recognized the moral clarity of not punishing children for adult messes. She pressed send and did not wait for applause. Months passed, stitched by diapers and drafts and hearings that were more check-in than conflict. The temporary orders became permanent agreements with room to breathe. Nora moved into a small rental with light at odd angles and a neighbor who left zucchini on her stair. She took a part-time job with Lighthouse's fundraising arm, writing to donors about invisible arithmetic, how $100 could become a bus pass that became a job that became a life. On a grey Sunday, Lena came up with her spinach lasagna and kissed Eli's fuzzy head. "He looks like a person," she announced, as if this were rare. They ate and laughed, and did not say the names they didn't need to utter anymore to be free. One evening, after a parent group, Adrian walked home along the canal and spotted Sloane outside a cafe. No makeup, a book open, the lemon tree crisp in his memory like a verdict. He hesitated, then approached, hands visible, voice quiet. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I'm not here to fix you," she replied. She marked her page and closed the book. They sat and admitted things in the way former conspirators do when the crime has a baby's face. He confessed, "I loved what you did for me. I confused that for loving you." She confessed, "I loved protecting you because it made me feel safe. It wasn't love, it was strategy." They parted with a civility that felt less like defeat than release. Later, she emailed Maya a single-line note. "I regret the harm I helped cause." Maya replied, "Noted. Be better where you stand. It was the only benediction needed." The final hearing was pro forma, a legal term that meant the paperwork had learned how to stand. Judge Elkins approved the parenting plan, commended the parties for sparing the court unnecessary drama, and observed, "The moral of this case is that babies have a way of forcing adults to practice adulthood." Afterward, in the courthouse hallway where fluorescent lights made everyone look equally mortal, Nora and Adrian stood a healthy 3 feet apart, a sleeping Eli in the stroller between them like a neutral country. "You look well," he said. "I am," she answered, and was startled to realize it was true without caveat. "I wanted to thank you," he added carefully, "for making space for me to learn without letting me rewrite what happened." She nodded. "I don't want you to be punished. I want you to be useful." He smiled then, not the boardroom version or the gala version, but the boy with salvaged parts version. "I can do useful," he said. "I'm learning how to do kind without asking for a certificate." They exchanged the week's logistics, drop-offs, the pediatrician appointment, whether Eli preferred the green spoon to the blue. They did not discuss the past as if it were a country either could still move to. They spoke instead of sunscreen and nap schedules, because survival is a holy thing, clothed in small talk. Weeks later, at a lighthouse fundraiser in a modest hotel ballroom, Nora stood at a podium and told a room of donors a story about a woman who left a party to save a life. She did not say Adrian's name or Sloane's. She did not mention the lemon tree. She did say we can keep ugly things if they're alive, and watched older women in the 3rd row weep quietly into napkins like surrender flags. Maya introduced her to a couple who ran a grant program. Deirdre squeezed her shoulder and whispered, "You did that." And for once, Nora let the praise land. At home, after Eli fed and slept in a position that looked like a negotiation with gravity, Nora wrote in the notebook she had begun months ago. She wrote, "We are okay." She wrote, "Truth is a room with windows, and I am learning to open them even when it rains." Her phone buzzed. A photo arrived. Eli grinning from Adrian's arms at the park, a smear of banana on his cheek, a green spoon like a trophy. He said, "Gah!" I said, "It counts," Adrian had typed. She smiled and typed back, "It counts." Then, after a breath, "Thank you for today. For all of it." Across town, Sloane sat by her own window, the lemon tree stubbornly thriving, and drafted a proposal for a corporate policy she wished had existed last year. No NDAs to conceal domestic harm. She sent it to 10 companies with no expectation that any would reply. 3 did. It was not absolution. It was a window. Nora closed the notebook, walked to her window and opened it a crack. Rain slipped in, soft as a promise. She stood there a long time, listening to a city that could contain both betrayal and repair, a woman's vanishing and a baby's arrival, a lawyer with a messenger bag and a guardian with a voice like a cello. She whispered into the wet air, for the person who had made her brave by being born. "We are here," and let the proof of it fill the room. If you've read this far, you know. This wasn't a miracle. It was a series of unglamorous choices, quiet exits, honest paperwork, hard apologies that turned a spectacle into a life. Nora didn't win by humiliating anyone. She won by refusing to be erased. Adrian didn't redeem himself by speeches, but by showing up for a child who demanded a gentler father. And Sloane learned, the long way, that control is not love, and optics are not truth. If this story moved you, if you've ever had to start over when the world thought your ending was already written, tap the like button so more women find it. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that vanishing can be an act of arrival. Subscribe for more cinematic, emotionally rich stories about resilience, hidden truths, and the everyday courage it takes to build a different life. Your voice helps these stories reach the people who need them most.